July is Client Appreciation Month at Sport Clips Haircuts. Get a double MVP for the price of an MVP, or cool it down and try the MVP on ice. It's our way of saying thanks for all you do. Hurry, ends July 31st. Sport Clips. It's good to be a guy.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNRadio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hey, it's Golic. Thanks for checking out the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Here's what we got for you from Tuesday. All-Star rosters have been revealed. Did A-Rod get snubbed? We'll get into that. And trivia with Jayson Stark. Ian O'Connor is talking A-Rod, JPP, and even a little golf. Greeny and I discussed David West leaving money on the table to sign with the Spurs. Plus, Bob Ley takes us behind the curtain as Outside the Lines turns 25.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Back and better than ever, Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline all morning long. A whole bunch of them talking about the All-Star Game. You heard the table set there. It'll be a busy day. We will go live to Tallahassee in a half hour, get the very latest on yet tragically another disturbing video that is released yesterday. We'll certainly talk plenty about that and the basketball and David West officially putting his money, redefining putting his money where his mouth is. All of that and more. But first of all, the Midsummer Classic is almost upon us. The teams have been selected. The final choices, as always, or as recently, will be made by you. And all the discussion I have heard so far, Mike, is about the snub of Alex Rodriguez.
Yeah, first and foremost, congratulations to all the All-Stars. And we have a young crew. 18 of the players are 25 or younger. That's happened in 2012 and 2008 with that number. So you have a lot of youth. You have 28 first-timers, 14 in the National League and 14 in the American League. So youth being served. We've talked plenty already about some of the young guys that have come up at the beginning of the season and through the season. Mostly it was position players, and then we had pitchers as well. All seem to be performing pretty well. You have a couple of rookies, Jock Peterson and Chris Bryant, both in this game. And you're right, a lot goes around A-Rod as well, but certainly congratulations to all of them. And a couple of old-timers as well, as Albert Pujols hasn't seen this game in a while, and now leading the American League in home runs and will start at first base because Miguel Cabrera is out of this game. So he starts at first, back in the All-Star game, deservedly so. That was really good to see. And then on the other side in the National League, A.J. Burnett, 16 years in the league and makes his first All-Star game appearance. So while we'll talk a lot about youth, and this is obviously where the game is going, it's good to see it. You don't want to sit there and say old-timers, but some guys, one who has never been in before and another who was a perennial All-Star when he was with the Cardinals and certainly has taken a step back a bit, but is having a resurgence this year in Albert Pujols.
Let's focus for a second before we get to A-Rod. Again, on the rookies, it's amazing to be a rookie, particularly a kid like Chris Bryant, who everyone knew should have been up before the season began. We all know why he wasn't. But even that, he didn't start the season in the majors, and now he's going to be in Cincinnati next week. He's the third Cubs rookie to be an All-Star. The last two, or the only other two, both were in 2008, Kosuke Fukudome and Giovanni Soto. And then Jock Peterson, the first Dodger rookie to make the All-Star team since Hideo Nomo, the first rookie position player for the Dodgers to make the team since Mike Piazza. So, yes, youth unquestionably served. A lot of names a lot of names that hopefully, or baseball hopes you will come to know as we move forward into a new era. So it feels like a transitionary period in baseball. And obviously some of the big young stars in the sport like Trout and Harper and all the rest of that. And then, of course, there is Alex Rodriguez, who was not going to be there. And the numbers are what the numbers are. You heard Timmy Kirchin, just a little snippet of him, that extraordinarily recognizable voice of Timmy Kirchin in the Open, saying that there's not another player in the American League who has an OPS as high as Alex Rodriguez, who's not in this game. He does have more home runs at DH than anyone else in the American League this season, including David Ortiz and Prince Fielder. Fielder is on the team, and so A-Rod doesn't make it. And, I don't know if that's a referendum or not. They're going to say no. Ned Yost said no, that it had nothing to do, the fact that he is A-Rod and all the rest of that. The fact that he was persona non grata within baseball, the fact that he sat out the year, the fact that not only was he suspended and involved in the PED part of it, but also all the rest of it that went along with Alex Rodriguez. They're going to say that had nothing to do with it. And I'm going to say I don't buy it. I don't buy it for 1 second. If this was 7 years ago, Alex Rodriguez is on this team.
I think I agree with you, but I'm not going to sit here and say it was an unbelievable snubbing, because if you look at the number, Prince Fielder is the second best hitter by average in the American League at 347. He only has 3 less home runs than A-Rod. He has 5 more RBIs. He has 30 less strikeouts and 30 more hits than A-Rod does. So I definitely think he deserves to be on the team. I think where some people, when Yost was saying he went with Teixeira because he was looking for defense at first base, there were those, including some of our analysts, that said, well, you could play Fielder at first base. He could be your backup first baseman behind Pujols, and you could have Teixeira. You could have A-Rod be the DH at that point. But Teixeira, while hitting, about 40 points lower than A-Rod, has 4 more home runs, 12 more RBIs, 18 less strikeouts than A-Rod does. I know there are more numbers as we heard our guys go into a little bit as well. But I don't think you look at it and say, oh, my God, this is the greatest snub of all time. There are some deserving numbers of these guys.
It is not the greatest snub of all time by any means, but I do think that it is a statement. There are so many analytics associated with baseball because there are so many numbers associated with baseball. So here's one that 3/4 of the people listening probably don't even know. But there's a statistic called weighted runs created.
Right.
And what that does is it measures a player's total offensive value. Total offensive value. According to that metric, A-Rod is the 14th best hitter in baseball this year. The 13 players ahead of him are on the team. The 5 players after him are on the team. So I'm not great at math, but even I can figure out, Mike, that's 19 players, 18 of whom are on the team, and 1 of whom is Alex Rodriguez.
What you said years ago, A-Rod would have been on the team. I agree with you on that. So while some numbers point in other players' favor, there are numbers that certainly point in A-Rod's favor. He has been playing well this year, no doubt about it. But and then,
by the way, can I just say, to make it clear, if they snub him for that reason, I don't care. I fully understand it.
Right.
He has done absolutely nothing to ingratiate himself to the baseball world. The fact that he's come back and behaved himself for 2.5 months does not undo everything that came before it. So if they look at it and said, look, all other things being equal, let's not bring this guy.
Let's not put him.
I'm okay. I'm not going to sit here and say that's the worst decision ever made.
There are those that said he should have been on the team. Those that say, well, okay, we understand why he's not. But then understand, after the show last night on ESPN that announced all the reserves, there were 5 more players selected in each league to be voted on.
And none of them are named Alex Rodriguez.
None of them are named A-Rod in the American League. So that went on.
It's Xander Bogaerts of the Red Sox, Yoenis Cespedes of the Tigers, Brian Dozier of the Twins, Brett Gardner of the Yankees, and the one who'll make it, which is Mike Moustakas of the Royals.
That'll give him 7.
Well, because if the fans are voting, how in the world is the Royal not going to make it?
Exactly right. They have 6 in right now. They'll get their 7th in Moustakas, I think, for sure.
Death taxes on the Royals fans showing up at the polls.
Good for them.
That guy's going to get in, which is all fine. Again, if you're listen, I don't really have a problem with any of it. If they're going to snub A-Rod, I don't have a problem with it, and you're not going to acknowledge you did it, so I'm not going to blame them.
No,
you're
certainly not going to say you did it. No.
And look, if it were up to me, I'd put him on the team because to me it's a show. It's a television show, right? Tuesday night is a television show. At the end of the day, I understand that home field advantage rides on the outcome. But does anyone really think that whether Alex Rodriguez is there or Mark Teixeira, or whether Alex Rodriguez is the designated hitter or Prince Fielder, that alone is going to shift the tide enough that it's going to make the difference in the game? Obviously not. So to me, it's a show, and he remains, for better or for worse, one of the most interesting people in the sport.
Yes.
And so I would put him there for that reason. Interesting. But I think they didn't put him
there. And he has the stats to be there as well.
Yeah, you wouldn't just be making it up out of whole cloth. You could easily justify putting Alex on the team if you wanted to. But you could also, and he did, justify doing not that. Or not doing that.
Not like me.
Not sleeping very well lately. This is Ned Yost doing not that on Alex Rodriguez.
We talked a lot about Alex Rodriguez, and you look back at this 5-man vote, and we have 3 infielders, 2 outfielders, and we felt that it was important. We don't have really. We've got Brock Holt that can play anywhere in the infield, but every other position has a starter and a backup. In the outfield, we have 3 starters and 3 backups. So I just felt very strongly that if we can get another infielder or another outfielder out of that 5-man vote, it would help us. That's what went into the decision.
Again, even before the 5-man vote, the thought was make Fielder your backup first baseman and bring A-Rod in as the backup
So
DH.
Can we just be clear on something?
Yes.
We decided not to put A-Rod on this team because we needed to make sure we had a backup first baseman in the All-Star game.
Yes.
Okay? Let's just listen to what we're saying here for just a moment. Okay? They didn't put A-Rod on the team because he's A-Rod.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And 2 months ago, the notion that A-Rod was going to be on the All-Star team would have been laughed out of a room.
It's been laughable, but now he has the numbers to be on it, but he's not on it, and we're all pretty sure we know why. And as you said, we're fine with it. I'm with you, and they're not going to admit it. But then it can go all the way to the other side where I'm reading tweets yesterday of what am I supposed to tell my kid if A-Rod makes the All-Star game?
Tell him to cover his eyes when Nelson Cruz comes to the plate.
Are you kidding me with that? I mean, maybe you tell your kid, okay, you do the crime, you do the time, and then you get another chance? I mean, that's what's going on here. He did the time, and there are those that feel he's still on something, and you can feel anything you want. But I'm not saying this just about A-Rod. I say this about anybody who gets punished for what they've done against the rules of their sport or illegally in society. As we know, Mike Vick went to jail and got out of jail. Then you get another chance. Now, teams don't have to sign you, but they can, and then you get a chance, and then if you perform, you perform.
Mike.
And that's what A-Rod did.
Absolutely. We're Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. We'll compare rates for you so you get the best deal, even if it's not with us, saving you time and money. Now, that's Progressive. Call or click today. Here's the only thing you can say to the fan who is saying, what do I tell my kid? Tell him the fans of Major League Baseball have spoken, and they don't care. They voted Nelson Cruz an all-star, a starter. The fans put Nelson Cruz in this game. Not the manager,
right.
Not the coaches, not Major League Baseball, not the other players. The fans voted Nelson Cruz, and he doesn't play in Kansas City. He plays in Seattle. The fans voted him in. He was just as much involved. He was suspended. It got a lot, not nearly as much attention as A-Rod, because nothing gets as much attention
as A-Rod. But he was suspended.
And it got an enormous amount of attention because he came back and then he was allowed to play in the playoffs.
Right.
Remember, and that was the big controversy.
Exactly.
So it's not like anyone who's been paying any attention didn't know that Nelson Cruz was involved in
Exactly
this.
Right.
The fans have spoken. That, by the way, should also be a message to the Baseball Writers Association of America. The fans don't care.
Fans do not care.
The fans believe that these guys do the crime, do the time, and then come back and they play. And in my opinion, if you're going to vote a guy starter into the All-Star game, then you would vote him a Hall of Famer. If you gave the fans the vote that the baseball writers have, do you think that they would vote to the fact that they voted Nelson Cruz a starter in the All-Star game? Do you think that means that the fans would vote Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens into the Hall of Fame?
I think the most the feedback we get, mostly the people that take the time to write or say something, it's usually because they want to rip somebody. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying most time people react to something, it's they want to react of why they don't like it. So I think while we would have heard most of that no, those guys don't belong, I think given to the full spectrum of fans out there, I think they would be in, because I think most people don't care.
Johnny Peralta also, thank you. I completely forgot. I had forgotten he was involved in biogenesis.
So again, Johnny Peralta suspended 50 games.
A starter. Voted a starter by the fans.
So is it just the size of the name? Does it have to be an A-Rod? Does it have to be for the writers? Does it have to be a Clemens? Barry Bonds, the writers haven't put anybody. But again, when you're talking about the Hall of Fame, you're only talking about the biggest of names.
Right. And in this case, A-Rod is a bigger name than Nelson Cruz and Johnny Peralta put together.
Without question.
But it's not like this was a secret. It's not like the list of names of biogenesis was not published. Everyone in the world who wanted to know about it knew it. And so if the fans made a decision that they want to see Johnny Peralta and they want to see Nelson Cruz, that is absolutely fine by me and I think should be fine by everyone and should be viewed as a message that the fans are ready to move on. And I mean, it has nothing to do with the discussion of today, but that Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and those guys should all be in the Hall of Fame. And the writers should be listening to the fans because ultimately that's who the game really belongs to.
Those are the ones walking through the halls last I checked, right?
The game belongs to the fans. Yeah. The fans are the ones who cast the vote. And in my opinion, Alex Rodriguez should be in this game for a variety of reasons, but I'm not going to sit here and make it into the crime of the century that he's not, because it isn't. Here's John Kruk saying he does not believe A-Rod was snubbed.
I don't think he got snubbed. I think Nelson Cruz, as far as DHs go, Nelson Cruz, Prince Fielder, are having better years statistically than Alex. I think what Alex is doing is amazing for the fact he hasn't played in a year and a half. But to say he got snubbed, I wouldn't say that. And when you listen to Ned Yost about the versatility, they need versatility. You know, Alex has been a DH all year. He's played some first base here and there, but other than that, you know, he's a DH. And when you have two guys statistically better, how many more DHs do you need?
He started, by the way, I only started one game at first base this year. He started twice at third, once at first, and outside of that, he has been a DH.
Yeah.
So how many DHs do you need? I don't know. How do you answer that question?
But as I said, for most,
it's the All-Star game.
Most were saying Teixeira out, Fielder backup first baseman, and then you still have two DHs in Cruz and A-Rod, and then at first base you have Pujols and Fielder, since Fielder will play can play first base. So that's been the thought process. Not the fact that how many DHs do you need, but that would be the shift. And Yost basically said he did it with Teixeira basically for the defensive need at first base.
So let's hear from you today. Do you think – I'm not sure exactly how I want to phrase the question. How do you want to frame the debate? Because it's not about A-Rod.
No, it's not, because as we just brought up, there are two guys suspended for PEDs that are starting in this game.
The question I'm the most interested in is really that, is if the fans are saying, we want to see Nelson Cruz, we want to see Johnny Peralta, we are willing to put the past behind them and vote them as starters to the All-Star game, does that mean fans have moved on? They have moved past this notion that steroid use is a bigger deal here than it is in other places. For example, last week, I wasn't here last Friday. You seem to have thought I was gone a lot longer than that.
I thought you were gone all week.
I was actually only gone one day. But on Thursday was the day that it felt like half the NFL got suspended.
Yes.
And I will admit that one of the most important players on my team was one of those suspended.
Sheldon Richardson.
Sheldon Richardson. Mm-hmm. And the very first thought I had, and I tweeted it, when I saw Shefty tweeted Sheldon Richardson suspended 4 games. Now, it turns out everyone is saying that was because of marijuana, not because of steroids.
Yes.
But whatever.
Oh, yeah. We had talked about that Friday.
I'm saying.
Right.
Some of them were performance-enhancing drugs.
One was PED.
Antonio Gates, right?
Antonio Gates. The rest were...
The rest were all marijuana?
The rest were all street drugs.
All street drugs. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was in and out this weekend with family stuff, so I didn't see everything. I was doing my best to follow on that stuff. But so all the rest of them besides Antonio Gates were street drugs.
Of the 3 that had 4-game suspension, there was another player that had 1 game, but it was for street drug as well. So it was the only PED was Antonio Gates. And he steadfastly denies knowingly doing all that. But the others are 4 games for recreational drugs. Most think it's marijuana, and the point on that is you don't get suspended for a first time 4 games for that.
Right.
So they had to have already tested positive probably a couple of times to be in especially if it was marijuana, because now, since the policy has changed a bit, it's changed some with marijuana. So,
forgetting that. My point is, the first thought I had when I saw that,
the same thing.
And I tweeted immediately, capital N, capital O, and as many exclamation points as I had characters remaining after quote tweeting Adam Schefter's tweet, I need my guy. Yeah. I need Sheldon Richardson on the field. All right? So I'm looking at the schedule, first 4 games. That first one against Cleveland feels kind of winnable. That's a win we need to bank, and now we're playing without Sheldon Richardson. That's the only thought I had.
Listen.
I didn't think, how am I going to explain this to my kids?
For those 3 guys, what I did is I pulled up the first 4 games because that's what the football fan cares about, and luckily for you, there's only one division game, and it's a 4th game against Miami. For a team like Dallas that loses Rolando McClain, and remember, Greg Hardy's also going to be out. Now, again, as I said, they do get Sean Lee back. Their first 2 games, Giants, Philadelphia. They have a couple of division games right there. But that's what happens in football. You don't hear that discussion.
That's the point. Yeah. There's no hand-wringing.
No.
There's no, oh, my goodness, is the sport now diminished? There's no, what am I going to tell my kids? There's just, when's this guy getting back? And my question, and I don't know exactly the right wording to frame it, is does the fact that Nelson Cruz and Johnny Peralta get voted in as starters of the All-Star game mean that baseball fans are ready to react the way football fans do?
Yeah, do you wonder if is it to a point through the game of baseball from postseason play to All-Star games, they want them in, but is the Hall of Fame a different line? I wonder.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
Let's throw it open for a conversation today. Mike and Mike brought to you in part by DraftKings, proud sponsor of our live coverage of the All-Star Game beginning Monday. DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of Major League Baseball. So we have all that on the table this morning and much, much more. Glad you've chosen to start your day with us. It's really a busy day. Tons of basketball today. The Spurs continue to load up. The Cavs continue to load up. The Spurs with a couple of announcements yesterday, including David West really putting his money in every conceivable way.
Or lack thereof.
Where
now.
his mouth is. Yeah, look, he's made a lot of money.
He has.
You know, turning your back on almost $11 million, and that's an awfully expensive ring he's buying if he's buying himself a ring.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Putting your money where your mouth is. Some people talk about doing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday, David West did it. Or maybe more to the point, he put his money where his ring finger is as he is trying to win a championship. Now, I read you the quotes from him last week when he left Indiana, and I said, this is a guy who's going to be a difference maker somewhere. This guy is a leader. He's about winning. He was mad at Larry Bird because Larry Bird was critical of Roy Hibbert, and he said, that's my teammate. We fight together. We stand together. Is everything about David West I like. To me, that's a winning player. And I really thought he was going to go to Cleveland. That's where I thought he was going to wind up.
I did too.
Obviously, they have a lot of big men there. They have a lot of big men in San Antonio, and they had another one yesterday. But here's a guy who passed on an option for $12 million and goes down to San Antonio for the veteran minimum. He walks away from almost $11 million this coming year to try and win a championship.
So $1.4 million he'll make this year. And, we did talk about his professionalism and his leadership. That's not going to be the issue in San Antonio. There's no worries there that he could go to a team that maybe lacks some of that and he could help there. He'll go be he'll blend in with what is on that team right now. A bunch of pros, a bunch of character people, a bunch of professional guys who understand the value of team. So he'll fit right in there. It's a guy who's made a lot of money. So these are guys, and a lot of it depends on when you do this. And when we're talking about this, let's be honest, he's made $88 million. So you rarely will see a person do this in their first big contract. Before they have a chance they could make really big money in their first contract, and they say, no, I'm going to go somewhere for less money because they don't have the cap space so I can be on that team. You don't really see that. And I'm not saying that's fine. I'm all for making your money, but what happens is guys will make their money and then they're in search of a championship, and I think David West thought he might have that with the Pacers. But that has fallen apart, so he realized he needed to go somewhere else for a guy who's been in the league for a while now to try and get that championship.
Listen, $11 million is a lot of money, and I'm not suggesting $88 million isn't a lot of money.
I'm with you.
But I'm not very good at math. But even I know that 11 goes into 88 8 times.
Yes, it does.
So what does that mean? What percentage? That 12% of all the money he's made in his whole career? Something like that?
He gave it up.
He walked away from a lot of money.
We're talking about Tim Duncan doing that. Tim Duncan had already made over $200
he's made $230 million.
So there's been a lot of money made there. So yeah,
I'm not suggesting you can't live on $88 million bucks.
But this is a sacrifice when you could make. Listen, if there are people close to him, family situation, I'm not if he's married or where he is with that, but I know my wife would look at me in an interesting way.
Yeah, she'd be more interested in looking at you if you had made $88 million in the first place. Here's Chris Broussard.
My pick in the preseason in the West will be the San Antonio Spurs. Not only getting LaMarcus Aldridge, which is the big news, but David West, like you said, a veteran, tough guy, can bang, can hit mid-range jump shots, unselfish. All he wants to do is win. He turned down, when he opted out of Indiana, he gave up a $12 million contract, or in last year of his deal, that he knew he wouldn't get close to. He turned down more money from the Cavaliers and other teams, took $1.5 million from the Spurs because all he wants to do is win.
Two teams and I know we're not talking about Golden State, and as I said, I do believe they're going to continue having the chip on their shoulder because everybody's putting San Antonio here now. But what Cleveland has done and San Antonio has done, and some of it is by, quite honestly, now San Antonio had the prize of the offseason, but a lot of it was still getting your own guys back and playing. Tim Duncan doesn't come back, it's a different story. LaMarcus Aldridge may not even go there in the first place. Who knows? And in Cleveland, it was getting the guys back again, Kevin Love deciding to be back, Tristan Thompson, Iman Shumpert for whatever piece of the puzzle that is. But getting guys to want to come back to that team to keep it where it is and then adding some pieces to it, and a couple of nice pieces, certainly in LaMarcus Aldridge and then David West.
Now, what players that we can think of in the recent past have turned down an enormous amount of money? I gave a little bit of a list here. Coming off a season where he earned $19 million and averaged over 20 points a game, Karl Malone took the veterans minimum to sign with the Lakers.
Went for the ring.
In 03-04.
When he was going for the ring.
Went for the ring. Remember, they lost in the final. Gary Payton, on that same team, finished second in total assists and made $12.5 million 1 year, took the mid-level exception with a starting salary of $5 million to join Malone on that same Lakers team. That was the year that Malone and Payton took the huge pay cuts. And again, it looked like it was going to work out just fine. They got to the final and then stunningly lost to Detroit. Grant Hill had plenty left in the tank, having put up a pretty good season in 06-07, the last year of his $93 million contract. Chose then to join Steve Nash in Phoenix for the biannual exception starting at under $2 million. Shaquille O'Neal had made $20 million 1 year, signed with the Celtics on a 2-year deal starting at $1.4 million. And then Ray Allen, who was fourth in three-point percentage, earning $10 million from the Celtics, next year took $3 million to sign with Miami and LeBron. So we've seen guys before take big pay cuts. Yep. Now, I don't know that I can count up all of their money. Karl Malone made a fortune. Gary Payton made a fortune.
All these guys
Hill,
made
Shaq,
money.
obviously.
Every name on here made a lot of money, but I get it. You make your money. This is, and then if you don't have the ring by then, you go find the ring. Or if you had it and you want to get another ring, you do what you have to do to get another ring. So I get it. I get guys wanting to make their money first, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it when that money is out there.
Michael Wilbon.
This guy's giving up $12 million guaranteed on the final year of a deal to go in for what I call half Kornheiser money. $1.5 million veteran minimum. So now you've put together a team where people have already demonstrated they're willing to sacrifice. I'm going to give up whatever you want me to give up because I want to win. I want to be with you.
Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance, creators of the Name Your Price tool. Choose from a range of coverage options and pick the price that works for you.
Let me tell you, if they don't win the title, David West's going to have a long look in the mirror.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, let's be, and only he can decide whether he's doing what he wants to do, what he feels is the right thing to do. But I don't think there's any doubt you're a human being. If you don't win the championship, there's going to be maybe a little bit of regret in that over $11 million that you left on the table. I don't think he'll ever admit it, but again, you're human. I think there would be a little regret. I mean, he is all in with his $1.4 million to win his ring.
We had P.J. Carlesimo in our studio yesterday, and he was an assistant under Popovich for several years in San Antonio, knows that organization inside and out. And so, to me, I tweeted this yesterday. You tell me if you agree. The San Antonio Spurs are currently the class organization in American sports. If you look at all the major sports that we cover on our show, and generally speaking, that we pay an enormous amount of attention to, which organization is more consistently successful, quote unquote, doing it the right way, with less controversy and everything else surrounding it? Yeah. Just goes out there and wins, takes care of its business, and doesn't have like a sniff or a hint of controversy.
Yeah, I mean, you put all those together,
who's even close? Right? I mean, if you look at the most successful franchises in recent memory in sports, you got the Yankees, who are up and down like a circus. They haven't won anywhere near as consistently as the Spurs have in very recent memory. But even so, I mean, they've got a ton of guys with a ton of controversy, including A-Rod, who we spent all of this day talking about.
The Patriots have plenty of wins, but they're surrounded by controversy. The Patriots are sitting there waiting to hear if their quarterback is going to be suspended for the first four games of this season or not. That would be by far the most successful team in football. Yep. Yeah.
Basketball, the Lakers have become like a circus. Mm-hmm. The team that they got nothing. All they do is win. Yeah. Is San Antonio. So the question that we asked PJ was, what is that? Where does that come from? To whom is most of the credit belonging for them being the way they are?
It's good people. It starts with Pop, I think, Pop and R.C. Buford, because they make the decisions. And then they, I think, attach a little more, not a lot, because it's talent. When you have Tim Duncan, when you have Tony Parker, when you have Manu Ginobili, started with David Robinson. That's the difference. Pop and R.C. can be as good as they're going to be. The first thing Pop will tell you, like every time people start throwing nice things at Pop, he goes, 21, Monitor, Tony, all those guys. So it's the people that are there, the kind of people they have. If they have a choice, you have to have the talent, but they'll take slightly less talent if it's a better person, because that culture is very important to them.
That culture is an excellent word.
Yeah.
And I give a lot of the credit, I'm not trying to take anything away from Popovich, to Duncan and David Robinson. To me, those two guys sort of have set the tone for that franchise for the last 20-plus years, and those are those kind of guys.
You take the clue from your leaders.
Yeah.
How they portray themselves, and where you give Pop the credit is Pop has no problem. You want to talk about, and listen, I'm not going to sit there and say he treats everybody equal up and down the bench no matter what, but we've seen him in the face of his superstars, and he has no problem, calling a timeout and getting on the court and getting in their face. And I do think that is a message to the team that says if the top guys are getting yelled at, plus the top guys understand that, and that's where you take your leadership. And this team almost runs itself. You talk about picking the talent, but you'll take slightly less to get the character. Well, they've leaned on a couple of Hall of Famers, with David Robinson and Tim Duncan obviously walks in there, and they've got other obviously Hall of Famers on that team as well. So you kind of got the best of both worlds. You got Hall of Fame players with great character. I mean, that's hitting the lottery, and basically they hit the lottery 5 times and looking to be the favorite to do it this year.
I'm just looking very quickly. I glanced over at Twitter. A lot of people are tweeting me, how about the Cardinals? How about the Cardinals? Not as many championships, but consistent and clean. Listen, I'm sorry. There's no computer hacking scandal going on right now with the San Antonio Spurs.
So, okay, I'll give you that, but that just happened. I mean, let's give the Cardinals their due over the last how many years. This just came out now. So I actually agree with that. I'm willing to say, okay, this was one thing now. But the last years they've been good. They've been a class organization.
So lots of them have. Plenty of these organizations have been class organizations. Yeah, they've been winning.
I'm not saying that I would choose them ahead of San Antonio, but I think it's a good example.
No, but, I mean, there is an enormous controversy hanging over them right now. As we speak, they just fired a guy from their front office this weekend.
As I said, I understand that, but it didn't happen 5 years ago where you can say, well, this was right now. So I'm willing to say, okay, put that one aside, but that they're not going ahead of San Antonio. I agree with that. I think the Cardinals have been a fantastic organization. This, certainly the thing that popped up right now, absolutely is a mark against them. But there's been a lot of years before that where they've done it the right way. They've had guys who weren't the superstars step up, and get the job done. I agree. I think they've been an excellent organization, with this notwithstanding, obviously.
All right, we've got Ian O'Connor ready to go here. We'll get his thoughts on a variety of subjects, including the latest on Jayson Pierre-Paul right after this word from Cabot. Behold the triple play. In baseball, it is beautiful, it is rare, and it's definitely effective. Now we go from a triple play at the ball game to a triple play for your back deck, specifically the triple oil protection of Australian timber oil from Cabot Wood Stain.
Combination of 3 superior grade oils provides rich color, gives your wood deck all-weather protection, long-lasting beauty. Australian timber oil was originally formulated to stand up to the harsh conditions of the Australian outback, so you know your deck can handle it. Australian timber oil from Cabot Wood Stain, 1 can, triple oil protection. Cabot, that's pro. Find your Cabot at Neighborhood Ace, the helpful place. We're getting help is like going to your neighbor with all the best advice and brands like Cabot to help you with your wood staining project needs. Ace, the helpful place.
Does anyone really think that whether Alex Rodriguez is there or Mark Teixeira, or whether Alex Rodriguez is the designated hitter or Prince fielder, that alone is going to shift the tide enough that it's going to make the difference in the game? Obviously not. So to me, it's a show, and he remains, for better or for worse, one of the most interesting people in the sport.
Yes.
And so I would put him there for that reason. Alex Rodriguez not on the All-Star team. We're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance, and joining us now from ESPNNewYork.com and Sunday mornings here on ESPN Radio, our friend Ian O'Connor is with us on Mike and Mike. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
We are well. What are your thoughts on Alex Rodriguez not going to Cincinnati next week?
I think he was worthy of being in the All-Star game. I also think, and I wrote this last night for ESPN.com, that I don't think it's the end of the world that he's not in the game. Certainly, Prince Fielder was a very worthy choice as the second DH, and you look at his numbers, they're better than Alex's. So you could certainly make the case that he belonged in there ahead of A-Rod. And I think the one thing that Yost could have done here is he could have put A-Rod in those final 5 candidates for the last roster spot and really given the fans the opportunity to make that decision for him. But he decided to go against A-Rod's entertainment value and for versatility and a better chance of securing home field advantage in a World Series that, let's face it, his Kansas City Royals might end up playing in. So I can't blame him for that, but that to me was the compromise. Let the fans decide among those final 5 candidates if he belonged, and that's where I think Ned Yost said, you know what, I know Joe Torre probably talked to him a number of times about the experience of managing and being around A-Rod in that circus. And even though it's only a few days, life around Alex Rodriguez for a few days could be a high-maintenance proposition. And my suspicion is that Ned Yost decided, you know what, I'm not even going to put it in the fans' hands. Let me just take care of this myself.
Yeah, so while Ned Yost can give a lot of baseball reasons, and some I'm sure valid because of what's riding on this game, how much of A-Rod's path do you think is coming into this where baseball, and again, this wasn't, unless it was the last 5, the fans didn't vote him in as a starter to anything, that this is baseball keeping him away?
I don't think it's baseball keeping him away as much as, let's start with the players, his peers. His peers decided Prince Fielder was a better player to this point this season, and you can't argue against that. Prince Fielder's hitting .347. Alex Rodriguez is hitting .284. Prince Fielder's OPS, I think, is, 943. A-Rod's is 902. So that's actually a good choice. Now, Ned Yost is obviously involved in the process as well, and he could have then decided, you know what, if the fans want to put A-Rod in, let me give them that opportunity. And listen, he could be a valuable bat at the end of the game in a pinch-hitting situation where maybe he helps you win that game and get home field advantage in the World Series. So I think baseball and Rob Manfred, they've actually been quite embracing of A-Rod. I think A-Rod has handled himself really well so far this year, but I think it would be ignoring the human condition to assume that this had nothing to do with it as it relates to Ned Yost. And I think he made that decision. I don't really have a huge problem with it because ultimately at the end of the day, Alex Rodriguez being in a 15th All-Star game is not going to help him long-term nearly as much as, saying, winning a ring with the Yankees without Derek Jeter, without using PEDs, assuming he's not using them. I think that would help him a lot more in terms of his standing in the sport.
Mikey and O'Connor is with us, ESPN New York. What is your sense of where this thing is headed right now with the New York Giants and Jayson Pierre-Paul?
I think it's headed ultimately, Mike, to he signs the tender for $14.8 million at some point. I know in speaking to someone who with knowledge of the situation last night, the Giants, at least unless that's changed this morning, they haven't even seen him yet. They haven't evaluated him in terms of where he is physically. They're still trying to figure out exactly the nature of the injuries to his hands. And at the end of the day, I don't think somebody who's 26 years old with that kind of talent and athleticism and speed and size, they're not going to let him walk away unless he's diminished to a point physically where he's not going to help them anymore. But as you know, the Giants won 2 Super Bowls at the expense of the Patriots because they had a quarterback and they had the ability to hit the other guy's quarterback. Without JPP, the Giants lose that ability. And they really lose, I think, any chance to be a serious contender in the NFC the way they are constructed right now. So I think they're going to take some time here, sort this out, and ultimately, as long as he's physically able to play most of the season, I think he'll be back.
To take your time and sort it out would give you only a certain amount of time to get a long-term deal. So are you saying that's not going to be on the table for the Giants, no long-term deal? He's going to play on this one-year deal?
My understanding is that really that option, Mike, a long-term deal, whether it's $60 million or another figure, that's just not going to happen. They have 8 days to get that done, and there's just too much here to sort out. And again, the Giants right now, I think, know less about this than most people believe. And even if JPP decided this morning, you know what, I'm going to sign that $14.8 million tender, well, it's a non-football injury, so ultimately he's got to pass a physical. If he fails that physical, they don't have to pay him, and that signature and contract become moot. So I do think the long-term option is there's no way that's going to happen in the next 8 days. So my suspicion is he'll play some games this year for the New York Giants on the 1-year $14.8 million salary, and then he becomes a free agent next year, and we'll do this one more time.
Mike and Mike, Ian O'Connor, who I'm sure at some point in the next few days is on his way to Scotland for some haggis and to watch some golf for the British Open, which starts next Thursday. So 3 questions on 3 different guys. 1, does Rory McIlroy play? 2, does Tiger Woods make the cut? And 3, does Jordan Spieth win?
Yes, and maybe. I think that Rory will give it a shot because he's defending champion. I think, listen, as much as playing soccer with friends is not handling fireworks on the 4th of July, this was not the smartest thing he's ever done before a major. But I think that he tries to stay off that foot for 8-9 days, plays 9 holes on Wednesday, and then gives it a go. And if he can't perform, then maybe he has to WD himself in the middle of the tournament. He doesn't want to do that, obviously, but when you're the defending champion and the guy who's trying to prevent your main rival, Jordan Spieth, from winning a calendar year Grand Slam, I think he's gonna try to play anyway. As far as Tiger Woods making the cut, I think you had to see some positive signs at the John Deere. I think the fact that he finished he was 7 under at one point. I think he fell back after that. He showed he was hitting some fairways for a change. I think that he just looked better. His body language, at least on TV, just looked a lot better. So I think St. Andrews is a place where he's won the Open twice. You could certainly look for some muscle memory to kick back in. I don't think he's going to win the Open Championship, but it would be great to see him in play on the weekend with a shot within 5 strokes of the lead. And I do think that at some point, Friday or Saturday, he'll be in the mix, in the conversation. And I think it really would be good for the sport to see him there with Spieth and maybe with McIlroy. As far as Jordan Spieth winning, he's got a game that he said travels, and he's right. I was at Chambers Bay for the U.S. Open to see him fight his way to that championship, and I was at Augusta. He won the Masters on talent. He won the U.S. Open on blood and guts and fortitude and scrapping and fighting, and to me, and on a linksy course. So doing it that way, to me, shows he can win anywhere at any time. He believes in himself. I do think it's possible he wins this and goes to the PGA with a shot at the Grand Slam.
Ian O'Connor, you hear him every Sunday morning here on ESPN Radio, coast to coast, 7 to 9 Eastern Time, and on his way over to Scotland, for which I am envious. Ian, enjoy. Thanks. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ian.
Ian O'Connor.
Well, I would say 2 things quickly about Rory. If he plays, tees it up, then it wasn't as bad as we thought. Because if it's truly a severe third degree, I would be stunned. So it wouldn't be as bad as we thought. And the other thing, which Ian I agree with, if he feels good enough to try it, then we'll see if he would have to withdraw. Because the one thing we'll say, if he starts golfing on Thursday, from Thursday for the rest of however long he golfs, if it's the 4 days, it's only going to get worse. His ankle is not going to get better while he's doing that. It is not going to stay the same. He's going to be hitting on it, and he's going to be walking on it 18 holes a day. So it's going to progressively, because it's nowhere near going to be 100%. Again, if he's playing, I don't think it was a third degree. So once he starts playing, he starts wearing it down again. He'll do all the treatment he can after and before, but it will wear down. And then over 4 days, without question it would.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Guys, at Sport Clips Haircuts, we appreciate everything you do. So this month, we're giving you double the Sport Clips MVP experience for the price of a single. It's the Sport Clips Instant Replay. After your haircut, go into overtime on our legendary hot towel treatment. Enjoy a double header of our massaging shampoo and soothing scalp treatment. And beat the heat with our new MVP on ice. Our legendary hot towel becomes the refreshing chilled towel at no extra charge. Sport Clips, it's good to be a guy.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Let's bring in the biggest soccer fan we know, our friend Bob Ley, who tonight will host an Outside the Line special, a 25th anniversary, 1-hour primetime special, which we'll talk at great length about. But first of all, good morning, Mr. Lee.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
We are well, and let's ask it to you. I'm sure this is one that has been asked of you 8 million times in 8 million different forms over the many years. We're coming off a Women's World Cup final, which more people watched than watched the NBA Finals and the World Series and everything else. The entire country got completely wrapped up in this, and it ended with a sort of celebration that we love. What, if any, carryover do you think it has?
Very little. You realize we're on the 3rd women's professional soccer league. The other 2, the prior 2, have had to disband, and and go the way of, the free market. The marketplace is the marketplace. Listen, that was an incredible event Sunday night, and I have a lot of good friends who worked on it in Fox, and I'm thrilled for them because they set all sorts of viewing records. But those weren't all soccer. In fact, I would dare say we're not even primarily soccer fans watching that game. They were Americans. They were TV viewers. They were folks rightfully carried up into this moment, which was one of the great athletic performances of all time, what the United States team did to Japan. But history will suggest, just look at last summer, where the American men's team, national team, was setting all sorts of marvelous records during our coverage on ESPN and ABC. Yet at the same time, MLS is what MLS is at a particular level of achievement. It does not necessarily translate, and there's no history from 1999 to suggest that it will. It's going to mean a blip at the box office, and that's great, and they're going to have to strategize and do the best they can with this. But I think everyone needs to temper their expectations here.
Why do you think, Bob? I mean, with the success, especially the women have had, I know the last win was 99, but our women have always been one of the top teams in the world. Why do you think it's that way in the States?
Well, again, when you get wrapped up in a World Cup in the United States, you're getting wrapped up in the flag, in the country. It's not a bad thing at all, guys. It's tremendous, and I've been at the epicenter of a number of these events. In fact, I had to ask a lot of my friends and family and neighbors about last summer because I was in Brazil. So what's the buzz this summer here in this country compared to last summer? And then, get their relative readings on it. But again, you're not dealing with soccer fans. You're dealing necessarily with the TV viewers who are into a patriotic moment involving the country. So you're going to have to create those soccer fans. And again, it's a brutal marketplace. There's so many choices out there.
Bob Ley is with us again tonight. Outside the Lines will celebrate its 25th anniversary with a 1-hour primetime special. Bob will host interviewing guests pertinent to the series, introducing some of the most impactful pieces they've done over the years and providing a commentary reflecting on his time as the face of ESPN's journalism. What can we look forward to? What are you most looking forward to sharing tonight, Bob, with the audience that has experienced some or all of the 25 years you've been doing the show?
Oh, my gosh. You're like, when we sat down to plan this show, guys, back in late last year, early this year, I think we jointly resolved this is an impossible task to take 25 years to distill it down to about 49, 50, 51 minutes of content. But I think you're going to get a sense of we're going to have new reporting on Mike Rice. You've already seen a piece of that on Outside the Lines on Sunday. New reporting on a tragic case of a Pop Warner football player paralyzed with one tackle in his life, and new reporting of what has happened to him in the intervening several years. We'll look at the areas of race and sexual assault and, of course, concussions, where for the last 15 years I think we've tried to take a leading role in the reporting there. I think, and one of my favorite moments will be a chance to sit in what we call debrief or have conversations with guys such as Michael Wilbon and Tom Ferry and John Barr and talk about these issues, and Mark Feiner-Ruwada, and give some context and look forward at the same time.
So when you look back on these years and these stories, the impactful stories that they were, Bob, I don't want to ask you which one you enjoy doing the most. I want to ask which one affected you the most?
Wow. As far as impact, and I was asked this question the other day, and it's not even, and to show you the Hobson's choices that we had to make about what's in the show, it's not even in the show. A number of years ago, in 1998, we did a show on the world of the gay athlete. And as part of that, I spent several days in a small town out in the hills of Pennsylvania talking to a high school athlete, a fellow by the name of Greg Congdon, who had come out to his teammates and to his town and was having a rough go of it. Even within his own family, I think his father was not particularly comfortable with his son's decision to be public, and also that his son had revealed that he was gay. And to spend time with this youngster and to talk to his high school principal and to see what his life was like. And remember that this was, 16, 17, 18 years ago. The courage that it took for a young guy to do that at that point, even today, but back then, I think was striking. And his was not an easy road. And I know he's doing much better in life. I believe he lives in New York City now. But that one stays with you for a while.
Mike and Bob Ley. And one of the great things about Bob, anyone who follows him on Twitter, as I do, knows he's very active on Twitter, very active on social media, very much still a part of what's going on currently, despite your long tenure.
Basically, that's a way of saying he might be an old geezer.
Running all this,
pretty much.
But you don't act like one.
Not a flip phone. I'm an OG, all right?
You don't act like the old geezer you could be. But it does sort of frame the question, which is 25 years of doing this with the enormous changes in technology and so many other things. How different is it now, Bob? How different is it covering the serious news in the world of sports today than it was when you started the show 25 years ago?
Well, I'll tell you what, and I think it's a bigger challenge in that there's more competition, greater chances for people to watch other media, many other options for you as the consumer, and as a result, I think, and much more scrutiny. No one sets the bar higher for us than we do ourselves. I think there are more challenges, but at the same time, I think you talk about technology, it's easier to reach out to people, to get feedback, to make contacts. I think it's not a mixed bag, but I welcome the fact that it's a more difficult environment, because I think it's forced everybody to up their game, and I'm so proud of the people I work with and what the reporting they do. I mean, guys like T.J. Quinn, who broke the biogenesis story, and just and of course that is continuing. You were just talking to Ian about A-Rod a few moments ago. I mean, that continues to ripple forward year after year. I welcome this environment. It's an exciting time to be doing this.
Well, Bob, congratulations. 25 years, it's a remarkable achievement, and we're certainly looking forward to the special tonight. And I was hoping the beard might make just like a quick sneak return.
No. The Swiss prosecutors developed an interest in the beard, and I thought it best it disappear for a bit.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks very much. We'll see you tonight.
Thanks, Bob.
They're going to wheel me into the sun now, so I get a little bit of sunlight this morning, guys.
Thank you, Bob.
The best of Mike and Mike.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt, frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Is Jayson Stark ready? Here we go. We've got the trivia question here. We've got a guess.
Since Miguel Cabrera joined the Tigers in 2008, he's had 6 30-homer seasons, and that's the most in baseball. Only 2 other active players have even had 5 30-homer seasons in that time. Think you can name them? Good luck.
All right. Mike and Mike is presented by Progressive Insurance, and Jayson Stark is on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Good morning, Jayson.
Morning. This is all right, guys?
What's that?
This is not that evil a question, do you think?
No, and Greeny came up with a couple of answers right away. I'm kind of deferring to him. I gave out a couple. You kind of.
I don't like the way you're doing that. You're setting it up to be completely my fault if we're wrong.
Yes, I am.
And we're probably wrong because there are too many. There were too many options here.
And there's a couple of obvious ones, and sometimes when we go with the obvious, it's wrong, but then sometimes the obvious is actually the obvious answer. So that's where you're evil, Jayson, and that laugh of yours just confirms it.
Yeah, that laugh.
The whole concept is evil when you get right down to it.
That laugh, you sound like, all of a sudden you sound like Vincent Price to me when you start laughing alone. All right, I'm starting to question this one now. I'm starting to question, I'm starting to...
That was your first answer?
I know. Well, we just joked last week that he's always the answer except when we get
You want me to take charge?
Go ahead.
Pujols.
Oh, it was Pujols.
Whoa! See what happens when I take control?
Okay, that's good.
You almost talked yourself out of Albert Pujols?
I actually did talk myself out of Albert Pujols, and Golic said it.
I thought he was going to say his 2 names, but since he took so much time, I decided to throw that out there.
All right, then we got one more. Go ahead, pick the one you like.
Well, no, I picked mine. You pick yours.
No, you couldn't be possibly leaving me more out to dry on this.
Well, if you don't like that, it's one of those 2, don't we think?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's this one, but...
You think it's which one?
I think it's this one.
Then say it.
It's going to be wrong. Here's the thing. If I don't say it, if I guess something else, then it will have been right. And if I say it, it will be wrong. Because we've already established that he's always the answer except when we guess him. All right. Jayson knows who it is. I'm trying to discern from his laugh whether it's right or it's wrong. I'm just going to say it. The heck with it. Jose Bautista.
Come on, Greeny!
Mike.
He's only had 3 of them. He's had 3 huge home run years. Might be headed for a 4th, but only 3. Sorry, man.
Is it Prince Fielder? Okay, we had it.
You had it. That was the second one.
That was the second one I said.
Why don't you ever just trust what you say? You. The first 2 names you said were Bautista and Prince Fielder.
Right.
And then you just said to me, I don't feel good about this one, and you pointed to Bautista.
Yeah.
So I said, go with your next one, which was Prince.
How close was David Ortiz by any chance? We also had that written down.
He's also had 3. There were so many obvious type answers to this one. That's what made it hard.
How close was A-Rod?
Oh, A-Rod's also got 3. There are 4 guys with 4, though. Ryan Braun, Ryan Howard, Mark Teixeira, and this would have killed you, Dan Uggla.
Oh, that would
that would have been ugly.
That would have gotten ugly.
Yeah.
All right, Mike and Mike, Jayson Stark is with us. We're wrong again. That puts us now at 3-12 for the season. But only 3-10 together.
And how many of those were you?
A lot of them were me. Yeah. Okay. Jayson, it is our contention that a lot of the attention being paid to Alex Rodriguez being left off the All-Star team is not just because he's Alex Rodriguez, but because he is genuinely the best player who is not included. Would you share that opinion?
I think that Brian Dozier also has a case for that, but if you're saying based on his numbers, does Alex Rodriguez deserve to be on the team? There's not even a question about it. He's 8th in the league in OPS. He's 6th in the league in on-base percentage. Every other player in the top 10 in the American League in either category is on the team. But, I find this interesting, Greeny, because I feel like to make the All-Star team, it takes more than numbers. You have to have strong support from somebody, don't you? And he didn't have that support from anybody. He didn't come close in the fan voting. He was nowhere to be found on the player voting. So maybe we're wrong in thinking he makes the game more interesting. It seems like the voting would tell us that people don't want to see him in this game. Am I reading this wrong?
Well, I guess one other way to find out, can we explain why if so many people thought he should have been on, why not put it back in the fans' hand for the last 5?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. If you think this through from Ned Yost's standpoint, he only had 2 position players he could add, plus he had to replace Miguel Cabrera. He easily could have used the Miguel Cabrera spot to add A-Rod because Prince Fielder was elected to the team by the players as a DH, but he's a first baseman by trade, so you easily could have added A-Rod in that spot. He obviously didn't want to do that, and the fact that he wasn't on the final 5, the final man vote, I definitely found that surprising, but again, maybe it's not an accident.
Yeah, because you mentioned Brian Dozier, and who's the other one you mentioned? Oh, I'm looking at your list. Brian Dozier and Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah, right. Brian Dozier leads the American League in extra base hits and runs scored, captain of my all underrated team. He should be on the All-Star team. He shouldn't be in this situation.
Right, but at least he's on the extra 5, and so is Kershaw on the. The point is, if you want to include those guys as being at least a part of this, they didn't even put A-Rod there, so he's the only one who isn't even that.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Based on his statistical achievements, there really isn't any justification for him to not be on the team or not be on the final man vote. So I think it's fair to wonder if there are other forces at work, don't you think?
Of course. Yeah. And did you find it funny? And listen, even if it's legitimate, it's funny that Ned Yost explained his rationale on selecting a player for the All-Star game based on his need of a backup first baseman. Whether it makes sense or not, whether Prince could have played there or not, there's just nothing says the Midsummer Night's Classic quite like a backup first baseman. We need help defensively at first in case things get away from it.
Yeah, well, and Ned did pick a team that suggests he's going to try to manage to win. He put Brock Holt on there as his only Red Sox player. That was one of his 2 position players he added, by the way, just because Brock Holt can play every position. He stacked up on relief pitchers as opposed to starters because that's the way he would like to manage the game. So obviously he did have a philosophy about it, but the managers do not choose these reserves all by themselves. They consult, and if they were consulting about A-Rod, who was fighting for that guy? Anybody?
Obviously not. And maybe you're right. Maybe we are completely missing the boat, and most of the fans are thinking, I don't want to see him up there in a big spot. It was my thinking is, who would be more interesting to watch batting in the bottom of the ninth of a close game coming off the bench than him? But, I mean, if the fans don't feel that way, then the fans don't feel that way. And as I said,
I agree with what you said, but my answer, Jayson, was Ned Yost. You can't fault him for talking about strategy, because they were in the World Series last year, and they could be again this year, and they could have home field, which makes it even more ridiculous that this rule is in place. To hear a manager talk about strategy for an All-Star game is ridiculous.
Well, if they're going to have this rule, and it's important to win, then you shouldn't be worried about who your utility players are on the roster. You should be playing Mike Trout for all 9 innings. Yes. That's what I'd like to see.
That's exactly right.
Well, and that used to be the way it was. All right, what other changes? I have a list of things that Jayson is into today, and I love this.
I love these other changes.
A couple other changes that you would suggest for the All-Star game.
Well, I would love to see a rising star spot on every roster and a living legend spot. I mean, for example, there are a lot of people yesterday saying Carlos Correa of the Astros should be on the All-Star team. He's played 26 games in the big leagues. Now, he might turn into the best player in baseball by next year, but based on the fact that he's only played 26 games, you can't put him on the All-Star team under this format. But if you had a rising star spot for somebody like him, you could have Correa in the American League, Maikel Franco in the National League. Be great. And I would love to see a living legend kind of spot, a chance to salute someone who's had a long career. Ichiro in the National League, maybe Torrey Hunter in the American League, or it sure would be a great spot for somebody like A-Rod, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's exactly where they. That's not where you want to put A-Rod. I would think
probably not. But I do like those changes. I do think it should go back to just being an exhibition, and I do like those changes.
Me too. How do you interpret, Jayson? Because we talked about this right off the top of the show, so a lot of people probably were not with us 3 hours ago. The fans voted Johnny Peralta and Nelson Cruz starters of this game. And so we asked the question, does that suggest that fans, for lack of a better way of putting it, have moved on from the steroid era? It's there. I just don't care. They deserve to be there. They served their suspensions. They're back now, and I'm voting for them. I feel like that wouldn't have happened some years ago. Do you interpret that as a significant statement made by the fans?
I certainly think it's got significance. I think it's too easy to say that fans have moved on from that era, but I've always thought that fans compartmentalize all of this, and they're very selective in who they care about, what they care about. And, if you're Alex Rodriguez, you never live it down. If you're Johnny Peralta, for whatever reason, you can. And I don't know, is there a rhyme or reason to that? Does it matter what city you play in, what fan base you play in front of? There are a lot of issues involved that fascinate me with how selectively people view the PED era and the consequences of PED suspensions. We got 3 players in the game who were one suspended for PEDs, the third being Yasmani Grandal of the Dodgers. And is it even going to come up next week? Barely. It's funny.
Yeah, it's interesting.
100% right.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the other side of it, Yankees and Red Sox, no starter on either team for the first time since 1945. What do we take away from that?
Yeah, I actually looked that up because a fan tweeted at me. He thought that there'd never been an All-Star game without a Yankee or a Red Sox starting. So I went and looked it up. It did happen one time 70 years ago. And, so you look at the voting. The Red Sox only had one player finish in the top 5 in the fan voting at any position. That was Xander Bogaerts. The Yankees had no player higher than 4th. I'm interested in what you guys think. I think people around the country are energized in different ways than fans in the big cities. I don't know exactly what it means, but it's interesting. The only player from New York, Boston, L.A., or Chicago who got elected was Mike Trout.
Yeah, I think Chris Bryant is going to break through that pretty soon. If I had to bet any money on it, I would bet that Chris Bryant is going to be a guy who starts getting elected year after year after year, and was put on this team, and correctly so, as a rookie. But you're right, and look, it's also a testament to the changes in the sport, the revenue sharing, the luxury tax. I tweeted this last week, Jayson, that when I know it's sort of mixing up our metaphors here, but when Greg Monroe chose the Milwaukee Bucks over the Knicks and the Lakers. When a player chose to take basically the same money and go to Milwaukee rather than New York or Los Angeles. I tweeted a decade ago, we were doing the show.
Yes, we
Mike
were.
and I are sitting right here, Jayson. A decade ago, I thought that the NBA should leave Milwaukee and the Major League Baseball should leave Kansas City because those two places were hopeless. Seriously, I mean it sincerely, that they would never be able to compete again. And look at where we are here. So, I mean, I guess it goes to show, A, I didn't know what I was talking about, and B, the landscape has really changed in both sports.
Yeah, there's so much money in both those sports, and so much money in baseball in particular. We've got a $9 billion industry, and it allows these teams to keep their players for a lot longer than they ever did before. You look at the standings, right? You have the Astros 29th in payroll in first place. The Rays 28th in payroll. They were in first place till last week. You have the Pirates 25th in payroll, have, I believe it's the second best record in the National League. And so you're definitely seeing signs that baseball is no longer about how much money you spend. It's how you spend it. I'm not going to pretend that money is not a factor. You and I have had some fun debates about parity and competitive balance in baseball versus football. I'm not going to pretend that it's exactly the same thing as having a salary cap, but revenue sharing and all the money flowing into the sport has definitely changed the landscape significantly.
And by the way, yes, the Pirates have the second best record in Major League Baseball at this point.
So we get to the All-Star break, as we're all going to be in Cincinnati next week. Who should be your starting pitchers?
Well, I want star power. I want swings and misses. I want Max Scherzer and Chris Sale. Anybody disagree?
No, I don't. Sale pitched another gem last night despite not getting the 10 strikeouts. Scherzer is on like an historically great stretch. I think 44 strikeouts and 1 walk. 42 and 1 in his last 4 starts. So, no, I don't think anyone would argue. Max Scherzer right now has got to be the runaway favorite for the National League Cy Young, right?
Well, Zach Greinke's got a 1.48 ERA, so I don't know how far he's running away, but he would be my pick if that means anything.
And then one more question for you. I saw this in the notes while I was away this weekend, that the betting favorites in the National League, the preseason betting favorites in all 3 divisions are currently the leaders. And in the American League, the preseason betting favorites are nowhere near the tops in any of the divisions. The Yankees, I think, were picked to finish 4th. The Royals, despite their great season, I think were picked to finish 3rd. And the Astros, I forget where they were, 3rd or 4th. I saw this in the notes over the weekend. Are we buying all of it? Kansas City, I think you have to buy. Are we buying all 3 of those teams?
Are we buying Yankees, Royals, Astros?
Correct, to wind up being in the playoffs.
It wouldn't shock me a bit if all 3 of those teams made the playoffs, but if you're saying that as you look at those teams and look at those divisions and look at those standings, would you bet the mortgage in all 3? I'm not so sure I would.
No, I wouldn't. I like the Royals a lot, though. I think that if I had to bet on one of the 3, I would bet on the Royals.
No, I agree, especially because the Tigers have really had problems keeping their stars healthy. And, the White Sox and the Indians have been such big disappointments. The Twins have been a great story, but are they better than the Royals? It'd be hard to argue that.
All right, it's Jayson Stark, and we once again got the question wrong, and we'll see him in Cincinnati next week, and we'll give him a little taste of his own medicine, although I don't even know what that means.
I have no idea either. What are you
Jayson, thank you.
The highlight of my week, guys. Enjoyed it.
This has been the best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNradio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The best of Mike and Mike.